All right, so today's review for the AP U.S. History exam is going to be the Progressive Era. Fortunately, I don't care about what it looks like. I'm all about substance and not style. And the Progressive Era is from 1890 until 1920. Of course, those are rough years. Now, what is happening in American history before the Progressive Era? That will be called the Gilded Age. Good. And the Gilded Age, if I can get a pen to work here. That phrase, the Gilded Age, very good, Mike Goga, is from Mark Twain. And what did Mark Twain, why was he calling the late 1800s the Gilded Age?
It looked nice.
Good. There was a gap between the rich and the poor. Mark Twain used the phrase, and there were problems not being addressed by the government. What was the role of government during the Gilded Age? Laissez-faire. So the progressives are trying to solve the problems of the Gilded Age. The progressives are trying to make society better. But Mike Goga also just said, keep in mind that there are some historians who think that we shouldn't separate the two. Some who think, I mean, if you could write that on an essay, that'd be amazing. Some who think that it really is a combination of laissez-faire and more reform. And the reason I would say that is because they did pass laws to regulate business during the Gilded Age. Interstate Commerce Act, Sherman Antitrust Act. So I'm going to write here, Interstate Commerce Act and Sherman Antitrust Act were passed during, if I could spell, the Gilded Age. Were they effective though? No, they were very weak. The best example of what life was like during the Gilded Age would be the Pullman strike. And this was in 1894. What happened in the United States 1 year earlier? There was a panic. And when the economy is bad, what usually happens to people's wages? They go down. That's okay. George Pullman cut his workers' wages. He owned a railroad car company. But he also had a town where people lived. And he kept their rent the same. Rent should go down if the economy's bad as well. So what did the workers do? Went on strike. So workers, led by Eugene V. Debs, went on strike. Mike, who was the president? Grover Cleveland, very good, Connor. All right. And Grover Cleveland forced the workers to return because the strike interfered with the mail. This shows that they were on the side of big business during the Gilded Age. But when you get to the Progressive Era, you're going to see a different change. So as far as a transition, is everybody clear on like what's leading into? I mean, if you want to know what the problems were, you know, it would be factory conditions, right? Child labor was a problem. What else were they upset about? Alcohol. What else were they upset about? What's that? Wages. Hours. Oh, what did I do? Oh, did I do something? The other video's done? Yeah, but... that's a problem. And we're back. Okay. Like, it was my fat fingers again that hit something. Wages. What other problems are there? Monopolies, right? The growth of monopolies they're upset about. What else? Women's rights. So these are all the problems. What about the meatpacking industry, right? So these are very good. Tenements, the living conditions. So these are the problems that are being created during the Gilded Age. And now you're going to have reformers, progressives, Mike, who want to solve those problems, and they largely want to do it with more government involvement. Can you please keep in mind, there is also a problem that was not addressed. Jim Crow laws. Segregation is a major problem. Was not addressed by progressives. They do not deal with African American issues. Is everybody clear on like the background? Now, if you have to write about the progressives, I would be thrilled if you could do this. What group was like the progressives before the progressives? We got to go populists. Populist Party. Populist Party. Oh my God. Was the Progressive Party before the progressives existed? That would be great to know. Because what was the Populist Party calling for? They wanted reform. So their platform, for example, consisted of the following. What they want to do to taxes. Increase. They wanted a graduated income tax higher on the wealthy. That's a progressive reform. What did they want to allow people to do during, they want a direct election of senators. Very good. They wanted, I just got to slow down. They wanted referendum. Oh my God. Referendum and initiative recall, people voting. They want the people to have more power. Okay? They wanted more silver in the currency. They wanted to restrict immigration.
Railroad regulation.
They wanted more railroad regulation. Outstanding. What's that mean?
One term.
Excellent. They wanted a one-term presidency. Fantastic. You're not going to remember all of that, but that's amazing. Referendum means that we're going to decide in the state of New York, should we build a stadium for the New York Jets? And the voters are going to decide if they want to pay for that. Or we're going to vote on, should marijuana be legal for people who have cancer, AIDS, health issues. The people are going to vote, and whatever the people say goes. That's referendum. Progressives and populists. What was the other name for the progressive party? It's called the People's Party. I mean, it was all about more power to the people. Victor.
Would you say they're more conservative?
No, absolutely not. No, because when you think of conservatives, you think of less government. Okay? So this is, but
Wait, didn't you say that they wanted more people, Chris? That's what I'm saying. Like, some of their views.
more people, not individual freedoms, more people's rights politically, to take part in the government. But that's good that you asked that. Okay? So is everybody clear on how the populists set the stage for the progressives? If you happen to remember the name William Jennings Bryan, he gave the Cross of Gold speech. So farmers, the populists were farmers and workers. And all of our money used to be backed up by just gold. So if you wanted to print, we didn't have the money we have today. The money we have today is not until 1913. So if the government wanted to print money, they weren't allowed to do it unless they had gold that they could back up the money with. Because they didn't have a lot of money and they didn't have enough gold, farmers were in terrible debt. So they just want more money to be printed. In the long run, that would be bad. In the short run, it would be amazing. So they said, why don't we add silver to back up the money also? And that's why in The Wizard of Oz, if you read the book, what color are her shoes? Silver. And that's the way to go home. But you don't realize that's the answer to all your prayers. The silver shoes. They made them red in the movie so it would look better on screen. Because The Wizard of Oz is an allegory for this time period, for all the populist party stuff. What is Oz, O-Z, the abbreviation for? Ounces. What do you measure in ounces? Gold. See? Yeah. So, okay. So is everybody clear? Yes, Matt. So recall means that if you have a government official and his term is up in 2018, but the people don't like him, you should be able to get rid of him early. So the voters would have an election where they would try to recall the candidate beforehand. We do not have that in New York.
Do other places have it?
Yes, California has it. Many of them do. If New York City had it, I think de Blasio would be gone. But we don't have it. Okay? Good. Everybody clear on all that stuff? Okay, so now let's get to what this progressive party is, or the progressive movement is all about. I would love for you to know, should I start with the presidents? Okay, so I'd love for you to know who the progressive presidents are. In order, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, Woodrow Wilson. Those are your three progressive presidents. Roosevelt and Taft were Republicans. Wilson was a Democrat. Out of all three, who's the most synonymous with the progressive movement? Definitely Roosevelt. No doubt it's Roosevelt. So Roosevelt, that is going to be foreign policy. So if we want to, we can do like all the wars in a second. This is just domestic. What does that mean? Here. So you can't really, progressivism has nothing really to do with foreign affairs. Right. So Alice asked, or somebody asked, so what's the square deal? Okay? The square deal was Roosevelt's domestic agenda. Like, that's what he called for. Now, what does a square have? 4 equal sides. So his concept is everybody in America should have an equal opportunity. Everybody in America should have an equal chance. He wants to provide people with an opportunity to be successful. But he does want the government to do it. He's definitely more government. So, Liz, the Anthracite coal miners' strike is one example of him trying to support workers, because they went on strike and it was getting close to winter. What does that mean? Heat. So he told the owners and the workers, you will settle this strike, because if you don't, I'm taking over the coal mines. And the reason why is because my people will have heat. I will not allow the American population to not have heat in the winter. That's a leader. Yeah, he's a great leader. And I don't want you to think the workers got everything, Victor. Workers got maybe 2/3 of what they were looking for. So it's not that he's 100% pro-labor, it's that he's pro-people. He doesn't want the individuals to be hurt by this work stoppage. Is everybody clear on that? All right. The next part of the square deal, he's called the trust buster. What's a trust another word for? Monopoly, right? Trust is another word for monopoly. Monopoly, there's no what in business? Competition. So if you have no competition, what can they charge you?
Whatever they want.
Right. So he said, we're going to break up those bad monopolies. Did he want to break up every monopoly? No. He distinguished between good and bad. He distinguished between trusts that were good and trusts that were bad. If they were good for the people, leave them alone. If they're bad, get rid of them. Okay. any trust that was not manipulating its prices, any trust that was, I can't give you an example back then because I just don't know enough companies. Today, for example, not today, like 2000, Microsoft, when you bought a computer, it came with the Microsoft operating system, and people loved it because it was the best operating system there was. The government sued Microsoft $1 million a day. They said it was a violation of antitrust. And I remember being in class because, I wasn't anywhere near computer savvy like the kids were. And I said, well, do you think it's fair that when you buy a computer, you kind of have to get their operating system? And the kids said, it's the best one. Why would we not want that operating system? Now there's competition. So that's the best example I can give you. Aren't there different operating? Yeah, there's just more. Right, so. Okay, not even really sure how that works. All right, so that's that's number 2. Everybody got that? Number 3, he's a conservationist. He wants to preserve land for national parks. Very big conservationist. Well, that's just the name for his domestic agenda. So, like, he's running for president. He is president. And he says, I'm going to give everybody a square deal. He just names it. That's all. Like FDR called his plan the New Deal. That's all it is. Right. It's just the name. It's just a slogan. Trump's slogan is Make America Great Again. But he may, if he gets elected, come up with a more formal name for what he wants to accomplish. That's all it is. Nothing more than that. All right, so he's a conservationist. Next. Just a name. This is very important. Very important. Okay? Consumer protection. Because of what book? The Jungle. When Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. Upton Sinclair was a male, by the way. It exposed the problems in the meatpacking industry in a big way. So now, what 2 acts were passed when Roosevelt was president? The Meat Inspection Act and the Food and Drug Administration and the Pure Food and Drug Act. You got that? If, by the way, you're writing about the Progressive Era, I'll give you an easy one for your synthesis. You go to New York City ever, guys? You ever go to a restaurant? What do you notice in the window? They rate the restaurants today. They rate their cleanliness. A, B, C. Oh, they do it here too?
Yeah.
Perfect. So they rate, and it's right up there. I mean, I don't know about you.
I've never seen anything but A, though.
Oh, I saw B last night, and I walked right by it. If you don't get,
Bad to get a B. I've seen some pretty sketchy places in A.
keep in mind that a lot of places are closed down. I mean, if you get anything lower than a B, I mean, chances are you're going to just be run out of business. So,
I've seen places you can see.
yeah, I don't know. I hope you didn't go in. All right. So, is everybody clear on the domestic agenda of Roosevelt and his square deal? You got it? So now, could he have run, by the way, he became president when McKinley was assassinated. Could he have run for a 3rd term? He could, but he chose to honor whose tradition? George Washington. So, it's up to William Howard Taft. And all we're going to say about Taft is that Roosevelt initially liked him. We're also going to say that Taft broke up twice as many trusts as Teddy Roosevelt. But we're going to say he was not as progressive as Roosevelt had hoped he would be. Okay? This is a review. This is not a lesson. I'm not going to get into too much detail. We're just trying to get the general overview here. So because of that, what does Roosevelt decide to do? Run again. So now in 1912, you have 4 candidates for president. First of all, did Roosevelt win the nomination? No. Taft won the nomination. So he's the Republican. So Roosevelt says, okay, I'll form my own party. Bull Moose Party. Also Progressive Party.
This is the election, I suppose.
Yep. Wilson is your Democrat. And Debs ran as a socialist. And those are your 4 candidates. Yes, Victor.
Is this the year that Titanic song?
Is this the year that what?
Titanic.
Oh, it is, yeah. Yeah, Titanic is 1912, yes. And who wins this election? Wilson wins because Republicans divided their...
Debs that led the strike.
It is the same Debs who led the strike, yep. Wilson wins because Republicans divided their vote. And what's good for you to know about Woodrow Wilson? It would be great if you knew that he's responsible for the Federal Reserve. I know I've taught that to you. They print our money. The Federal Reserve is in control of all of the money supply. They determine how much money goes into circulation. Jack, you know who the chairman of the Federal Reserve is? It's that lady.
Oh.
Janet Yellen. Do you know who it used to be, Jack?
The guy.
Ben Bernanke. Good. John, the guy you're talking about, Jacob Lew, is Secretary of the Treasury with the squiggly signature. Yes. For those of you watching in Nebraska, this is his signature. I'll just show you. No, Jacob Lew. I should just. These no, the pens are not. Oh, there they are. So this is Jacob Lew. They made him change it, so now it's a little bit clearer. All right. So so Wilson's responsible for. And now I can't get it to work again. Oh. Wilson's responsible for the Federal Reserve, and 2 amendments are ratified. Well, really 4, but 2 amendments. Hit pen.
Stop inking.
Okay, thank you. 16th Amendment is the graduated income tax. 17th Amendment is direct election of senators. Boy, does that sound familiar? Yeah, Populist Party. There are 2 others, but we're going to do them on the next slide. So this is all your presidential. In 1913, I think, for both. Okay. So that's all your presidential for the Progressive Era. So now, I'm sorry. So now we're going to go to more social issues for the Progressive Era. And we're going to write down that if it is largely the work of what group of writers? Muckrakers. Muckrakers. A name given by Theodore Roosevelt. He came up with this name. A name given by Theodore Roosevelt to describe writers and journalists who exposed the problems in society. The best names to remember are Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, and Jacob Riis. Jacob Riis, who wrote How the Other Half Lives. Say that again. You know, he really was not supportive. He used that phrase in a little bit of a negative way, but he responded to what they did, and that's right because of that. So they are very influential in exposing the problems. So now, Yeah, you would think that he'd be a little, but I know I've read that he wasn't being positive when he used that phrase. So, all right, well, let's move on. Let's not worry about it now. So, the Muckrakers are going to lead to a lot of reforms. So, here are some of the things that I'm just going to say. We're going to get child labor laws, which is very positive, obviously, because of this time period. We're going to get safety laws in factories. We got to clean up the conditions in the factories. We're going to get building codes for apartments. So now you have laws that have a limitation on the number of people that can live in places, and they have to be safe. So this is what's happening during the Progressive Era. Yes, Liz?
Is this when the triangle shirtless?
Yes. So in 1911, there was a Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City. 146 women were killed. As a result of it, 36 new safety laws were passed. Give you an example. The ladder only reached the 6th floor. They were on the 9th floor.
Weren't like the windows locked?
The windows, right, were locked. Right. Give it. Right. I'll give you an example. I don't know why it's in my head. There was a principal in New Jersey in the 1980s that was really trying to clean up his school. There's a movie called Lean on Me about it. One of the things he did to keep all the drug dealers out is he locked every door in the building and put like a chain lock around it so that nobody could open it. And the fire department came in and said it's a violation of the fire code because there are laws that you can't do that. So, all right. So and by the way, Mike, you would think that the Triangle Factory fire happened during the Gilded Age based on what we teach you. But do you see why they think it's more blended? The fire happened later. So it's really better if you can know that. That would be good. Now, what a lot of kids forget is that there are two, like they'll get an essay in the Progressive Era and they'll say, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what to write. And I say, really? So you don't know anything about prohibition? Really? You don't know anything about women's suffrage? That's progressive reforms. You may not like the reforms, although I hope you like women's suffrage, but those are reforms. So the first thing you could write about is the Temperance Movement. Who was the lady in the bar with the axe? Carrie A. Nation. Right? She's trying, and you should all know temperance is the movement to ban alcohol. Correct? All right. And what was the WCTU? You'll find out in 1 second. Michael Goga, you are correct. The WCTU is the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And religion was a big factor in the temperance movement. The president of this organization is often referred to as the most famous American nobody knows. And her name, correct, Johnny, is Frances Willard. Frances Willard. And she was very largely responsible for what amendment eventually being ratified? 18th Amendment. 18th Amendment is going to lead to prohibition. It's no big deal, but try to use the terminology correctly if you have to write about it. Temperance is the movement to ban alcohol. Prohibition is the time that alcohol was made illegal. I am assuming you all know why women wanted alcohol illegal, and I'm also assuming you know what happened as a result of it. Al Capone. This is still technically Progressive Era. So
what are we doing right now?
yeah. Guys, we're taping, okay? So, good. Al Capone, bootlegging, bathtub gin, smuggling, all sorts of illegal activity. It was very difficult to enforce. I would love for you to know the details of the suffrage movement because, first of all, I'm just feeling that there's going to be a women's essay, but it overlaps. So this is not during the Progressive Era, but you should all know that in 1848, women had the Seneca Falls Convention. And that's when women were closed out of the anti-slavery convention in London. So instead, they had their own meeting in upstate New York. This is the beginning of the women's rights movement. What are women more concerned about, temperance or suffrage? Temperance. They're more concerned with temperance, but suffrage is a key part as well. So, some of the names you can know are Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Please know they were not around during the Progressive Era. I don't want you to get confused. If you watch the women's video, you'll understand. But who is around during the Progressive Era? Alice Paul. Alice Paul staged a hunger strike in jail. She was a very radical member of the women's suffrage movement. And here's the final part. Women were split. Should they focus on a national amendment or should they go state by state? The debate was national amendment strategy versus state by state strategy. Some women said, let's just try to get as many states as possible. What was the first state to give women the right to vote? Wyoming. And then, okay, New Jersey was, and then they took it away. Right, so either answer is fine. So they took it away because there was an election. No, there was a vote to move the location of the courthouse. And when they counted the votes, twice as many people voted as there were people living there. Men were dressing up as women, so they blamed the women and took the vote away from them. Exactly. So that's the big debate. And in order to get an amendment passed, you need 2/3 of the states to propose the amendment.
What's the national amendments?
So should we, okay, an amendment applies to who? Everyone. If it's an amendment, it applies to everyone. Where is marijuana legal today? Colorado, Washington, D.C., Washington State. It's not legal everywhere. That's a state-by-state strategy. If we had an amendment, it would apply to the whole country. So some women thought we need to fight for an amendment. Others said, no, let's keep getting one state at a time. Victor? I think it's like decriminalized. Like it's not legal, but they won't arrest you, I think. So, but they need 2/3 to propose the amendment, and then 3/4 of state conventions must ratify the amendment. Today that would be 38 states. Back then we only had 48 states, so the number is 36. They had 35. 35 states ratified the amendment. They need one more. And the one more was Tennessee. And it was up to 25-year-old Harry Burns, who was in the convention. And he reached into his pocket and he saw a note from his mom. And his mom said, be a good boy and make your mom proud. And his vote was the deciding one to make what amendment? 19th Amendment official. Connor. Oh, there your hand up. Okay. And that leads to the 19th Amendment. And then we're all going to write down that Charlotte Woodward was the only woman to attend the Seneca Falls Convention who lived to see the 19th Amendment. Everybody got it? Progressive movement did not address segregation. Failed to address segregation. There were two black leaders who addressed it, Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois, but it did not address segregation. So, in conclusion, to sum up the Progressive Era, for those who would like one sentence to describe this time period, I would say, what? I'm doing well? I would say, a little slow there, Mike. I would say the Progressive Era was a time period in American history when various reformers on the federal, state, and local level attempted to improve society both economically and socially. Like the best sentence I've ever written. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You're welcome. You're welcome. What I do? Oh, I made a mistake? Oh. To improve society both economically and socially.
It's just a disaster.
I still have the record for the typing award in high school, but this keyboard does not work for me.
I don't think.
I don't know how many. It was ridiculous, and it was on a real typewriter. So
Probably no
it was,
competition.
and I owe it all to Miss Singer. She was the best business teacher.
Go up against.
She was amazing. I was so far ahead of everybody, it didn't even matter. So. All right, so nobody needs to hear about this in Colorado. All right, so let me.